through, right, a probate process, which in California, most people have heard that word and it starts ringing off some alarms. But if you haven't actually been confronted with probate, then you may not necessarily know what a nightmare, specifically in California, that is for families, especially dealing with, oftentimes the emotional part of experiencing a loss. So not only are you trying to navigate this emotional event in life, but now you're dealing with financial difficulties and, facing the fact that I could be giving a significant portion of my assets to the state, right, to pay for this probate process and not even seeing really a penny of it for 18 months, 2 years. So those are the types of things that I love to unpack with people before the tragic event or the unexpected injury or all those things. And specifically, obviously for me, my heart is as a law enforcement officer, as a first responder, is to make sure that that message is loud and clear to the first responders in our community, but certainly not exclusively, because it really does affect all of us.
Yeah, and you know that I'm also a family of first responders. I was also in law enforcement. My husband's law enforcement military, so I connect with you on that level because it's something that a lot of people overlook, and especially in the first responder community, oftentimes you have your basic coverage, but not really thinking about the full picture of your family. So we kind of have that connection as well. But maybe we can just go over estate planning in general, because although trust is part of that estate planning, there's a lot that you handle under this umbrella of estate planning. So maybe if you could just give like a brief synopsis and summary of what does estate planning look like, what's involved with it, so that we can make sure that we're tackling all those parts.
Absolutely. I love that. And I really do look at it like a package deal, so to speak. I do not recommend that people come in here and start trying to piecemeal, things together. So I've worked really hard, and I have a team with me. We've worked really hard to streamline the process, make it as comprehensive as it needs to be, right? But also not bog people down with a bunch of decisions. Well, do you need this? Do you need that? Listen, I can tell you what you need, right? And just on a basic level, let's say, mom, dad, 2.5 kids walks through the door, right? At the very minimum, and something that is definitely all encompassing would be a revocable living trust. And when we talk about trust, revocable living trust just means that it stays with you for your lifetime, right? A house that we own now is going to be put into the trust and held there. At a time that we sell it, by another house, we can exchange those assets, right? So it's fluid. There's things that are coming in and out of it as we get older and gain more assets and things like that. So we have that piece of it, and then a will. And oftentimes people don't realize that we do still need a will even when we have a trust in place, and it's called a pour over will. And I tell people it's like having a cup of water and pouring it back into the trust, right? So that will is going to say, hey, listen, if there's something that I left out of that trust, my intention is to have it pour back over into that trust bucket so that it can be distributed per our wishes. I think that it's important to point out here where the trust comes into place and where it's really important. Oftentimes, we start a career at 20, 24, 25 years old, right? And we make those beneficiary designations at that time, and they sit there and we don't think about it, right? And maybe at that time I'm single and I name a parent. Maybe I'm in a marriage at that point and I name that current spouse. Well, life goes on. Maybe I get a divorce, I'm remarried. I don't go in there and do that deep cleaning, right? But when I have a trust in place and those documents, the trust is funded, so those assets are moved into the trust, I'm far more likely to keep up with those types of changes. So I've found that having that in place helps people kind of have one repository, so to speak, to go to and make sure that everything is as it should be in terms of designations. So we have the revocable living trust, the will, or wills for a married couple. The other thing that the will does is names guardians for minor children, right? And it's not often something that we think about when we're raising these young kids is, I travel with my spouse a lot, right? Because, when you're married, you do a lot, you're riding in cars together. The likelihood of a simultaneous event occurring to both of you at the same time is higher than you and your best friend or you and someone else, right? So I tell people it's really important that we have those designations in place so that in the event of this tragedy where both parents are either incapacitated or pass, then who's going to take these children on physically and financially, right? And do we want to leave that to the family to figure out at that time? Or do I really want to articulate my wishes about that now, and have that in writing and have it be clear? So that's part of the will process. And then the other documents are power of attorney. That's for financial decisions, right? For advanced medical directives, which is basically the medical side of a power of attorney, HIPAA authorization, so that I can get access to that confidential medical information. And then we do other little things in there depending on people's scenarios, right? Structured trust is a big one for minor children. I don't want my 8-year-old to get $500,000, right? When if something happens to me. So I need to set that up so that I'm taking care of that child until they're of an age to be able to have the benefit of a larger sum of money. So that's kind of, the general conversation that we live in. The other thing that I'll say is, it drives me nuts how much people will charge for these documents. It's really unfair, and it just it gets my goat a little bit. So I always make sure that aspect of it is fair, and that we talk to the family about their assets, about what their needs are, and come up with, a solution that makes sense for everybody.
Yeah, what I love is you also said, case by case, you also have payment plans, because I know that's a big concern with people, is just coming up with the amount of money that they need to do it. And so being able to pay payments is, makes it more affordable for a lot of families. So I really love and appreciate that. One other thing that I often get with clients, as far as a response, when I say, oh, have you set up an estate plan? They're like, no, but I have a will. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about how a will does or does not protect somebody in the case of, probate, meaning that if they pass away and they don't have a trust set up, now it has to go into the, to the courts to make those decisions.
Yes. So a will can never pass without going through probate, where a trust can go through the process of trust administration. One thing that I think people don't necessarily know about or isn't talked about, that a will is public, right? It becomes lodged with the court. That is public information. So whatever you have in that will that you may or may not want the world to know about, you lose that, you lose that, I guess, anonymity, so to speak. Whereas a trust does not have to be, it is not public. It's not a public record. It's kept with you at the time that the trust needs to be administered. You can go to an attorney and get advice about how to administer the trust so you do it properly. There's a lot of moving parts with that aspect of it as well. But yes, a will is going to go through probate, the same process that I talked about before. And the irony about people saying, well, I don't want to spend the money to do that, when you realize the reality of probate and how much money that will cost you out of the estate, it is a steal to pay for a trust,
Yeah.
So, it truly is important. The other thing about a will is it only talks about upon death, right? So you have no coverages of incapacitation or other life events that may occur where you may need a power of attorney to step in, advanced medical directives for healthcare decisions. None of that is covered in a will. It's just for death, right? There's very initial planning that can be done. Some clients have come to me. It's a very rare occasion. Some clients, single clients, not homeowners, very limited assets. They just need a will now in place because they don't have, and I would never tell somebody you absolutely have to have a trust. But most of the people that you and I are dealing with, yes, you do need a trust. You're a homeowner, you have young kids, you have this, your life is being built right now. We need to have that. And I talk to clients a lot about a trust being a foundation to a house, right? We need to build the foundation strong. And then throughout our lives, you can make an addition to a room, you can, knock down a wall, you can redesign the kitchen. Your trust is something that you can get in there and move the parts around, but we really need to have that basic foundation.
Yeah, and a will can be contested too. I think that's a big thing, is people just think, oh, I have a will and it's good. I mean, I've come across it many times with clients where after the fact, you have all these family members that are fighting and trying to contest a will that's creating so much animosity. So if nothing else, creating a family unit, and keeping it intact after. I know for me, that's like, a big thing for me, is I just want the passing of, when I do go, to be, as seamless for my family and not have any issues. So that's why I'm a huge advocate. And I know that it's hard because we live in a world where it's such instant gratification for stuff that we have. And so a trust is kind of like the thing that you don't see. It's a protection that's there. And so it's hard to justify paying when you don't tangibly have something to hold. And I understand that. And that's why I wanted to have, a video that we can kind of send out and we can send to people to really, get into why does it make sense for you to, protect your assets. So maybe if you could touch a little bit around, additional protections that it might place against lawsuits or other things like that. And then also maybe even some scenarios that you've come across where it's like, okay, this is, something that's common that happens that people don't think about. And here's what it could potentially cost if you don't, set one up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Excellent questions. I think there's like a lot there to dive into. I would say that the most important things that I see is like you, I really want it to be clear what's going to happen or where these assets are going to go upon my passing, right? I don't want to leave that up to some person that has not been in my life, doesn't live my life, doesn't know me like that, right? I.e. a court, a judge, going through that process is very, it strips you of your ability to articulate that yourself. And I think for most people, it's like, well, I don't want to leave that stuff to chance, right? Because they're just going to pull apart everything and say a little bit to you, a little bit there, next of kin. Oh, you've got we found a second cousin down somewhere that can have this particular asset. I do have some strong examples, and certainly it really drove me to open this type of firm, being in law enforcement and seeing the types of things that were happening when tragedies occurred within our department. When officers were killed in the line of duty, the type of infighting that you're describing, in terms of, well, this person was named as a beneficiary, but they're not entitled to that money. That person never would have wanted it that way. You hear it all, right? They would have never wanted that person to get that money. Well, guess what, right? They didn't have anything in place. So who's getting that money? Right? I've had a lot of scenarios with combined households, right? Step parenting style stuff, step children, and making sure that people want to make sure that their children are cared for in their lineage, right? That it doesn't go outside of their family unit and pass to a stepchild that maybe they don't have the best relationship with. Or, I do a lot of planning around, well, my 17-year-old is not somebody that's going to be able to take that money and do something useful with it right now, right? They're going to go to Vegas when they're 18 and come back after one weekend and have no money left. So being really thoughtful about those types of decisions, right? Like, should I give them a third at age 35, or do I give them $20,000 for a down payment on something or for a wedding? These are the types of things and decisions that, and I tell people, I call it like parenting from beyond, right? So what would you want to instill in that child or give them or not give them during those really important years where they're going to be building and probably going to school, or maybe seeking a higher education. So within my career, and because of positions that I held, I was privy to a lot of information that was going on in the background. And what happens is you have a department who's grieving, a community that's grieving, a family that's grieving, and in the background of it, you have all kinds of BS about money. And it's really the last thing that I think any of us would want to be handed while we're dealing with a tragedy, and we don't know when these things are going to happen. You might think I'm young, and I think we all have that, right? Kind of superhero mentality, or I'm going to be here for some permanent amount of time. It's just not true. And in the first responder community, even more than ever, right? This unpredictability, this hostility that's been, going on for years now. It's so much more important now than I think ever.
Yeah, I see a lot too, even outside of the first responder community, with business owners, where you have a partnership, or even if it is your business, if you don't have your assets protected, you're not protecting your family. Like, that's a huge one that I see. So there's so many scenarios that come around as far as asset protection. And that's really kind of what you're creating, this entity, which is, the trust that's holding the assets in it as well, to make sure that your family's taken care of. Why work so hard today if it's all just going to go wherever tomorrow? I mean, there's the purpose to our madness in creating a legacy, is also protecting it. So I think it's really important too. So I appreciate you going over all the information. I mean, really the best decision that you can make once you own a home or you have assets that don't have a beneficiary. So if you don't own a home and you have a 401k, you can add a beneficiary. You don't need to set up a trust. You can still do an estate plan and make sure you have like a power of attorney, medical directives, and things like that if it's important to you. But once you start accumulating assets that don't have a beneficiary, once you have homes, that's the only way that you could protect those assets. And a lot of people just don't know. And so I think it's really important that this education gets out there. I hate seeing the court system and the government get more money is kind of my fallback between it. It's your money, you worked hard for. It should go into your family legacy and your family's pocket. So really it's a no-brainer. I mean, it's the only way that you're going to protect your assets. The biggest objection to that is I don't have the funds to fund it, which you so graciously have, created a solution for that. Looking at their finances, being able to work with them, as well as setting up a payment plan if needed to make sure that they're protected is huge. And your commitment to the first responder community, it was really, inspiring. And that's why I, wanted to jump on the video with you too, is I have a huge community of first responders, and I'm really passionate about making sure that their families are protected. We see it on the other side, right? We're involved in a lot of the aftermath of families that, unfortunate things happen and their families aren't protected. So we want to make sure that that happens.
Yes, and thank you for your commitment to the first responder community. I think, having these conversations with like-minded people, I mean, it doesn't even have to be first responders. Again, that's just obviously we have that shared background, but we live in a world right now that is wholly unpredictable. I think more than any of us even feel comfortable with, right? And so this is something that's basic, and money should not be a barrier in my mind. It should not be a barrier to this. It will cost you so much more on the back end, not just financially. If that's the concern, yes, I think I'll work with anybody, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I just want to honor you and thank you for your time and your commitment today. I'm going to go ahead and share all of your contact information, and also I'll attach it just so we can make sure people can reach out to you. If there's one thing that I can, not stress, or stress enough, is just make sure that you're taking the time to get this done. A lot of people wait, and they think that, oh, I'll have enough time, I can get it started. It's unfortunate. I mean, I've had it where people start it and then all of a sudden, they pass away while they're working on the trust. So just start it, be aggressive with making sure that you get everything put into the trust right away to make sure that you're protected, and then just do an annual check-in and review if anything changed. I know my kids are older now. My youngest is 17, and so when my son, when he would turn 18, some things had to be adjusted, because I was one of those parents from the other side where I was like, you're going to go to college, or you're going to use this money for a down payment, yes, whatever it is in stages, yes, because I've seen it, on the other side of it, being in this and working with people with finances. So set your family up for success, take the time, make the commitment to do it. There's no reason not to, now that there's resources for them to be able to do it financially as well. I mean, especially with COVID and seeing everything that happened, it's super unfortunate
yes,
how many people were not protected. But what's even worse is they just didn't know. So that's my thing, is I just at least want to get this out there so that and then it's your choice, if you want to do it or not. But I want you to have the information to know what you can do to protect your family.
Awesome.
So to reach out to Tess, as you can see here, you can go to the website Deterding law.com, where you can reach out to the 916-799-0167. Please do it. If you don't take action now, it probably won't get done, and then something could happen and you would regret that you didn't. So take action today. Call, get an appointment at least set up, do an initial consultation so that you can make a smart decision moving forward. Cool. Well, thank you, Tess. I so appreciate you being on here today.
Thank you so much for having me. The more information out there, the better. So I appreciate you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.